I am now pleased to introduce to you our trainer today. Dr. Mara Gottlieb is the president of Talking Changes, an anti-oppression and bias awareness consulting firm. For over 20 years, she has run workshops across the country, including serving as a keynote speaker and presenting at NASW conferences. Her programs address subjects ranging from cultural humility to anti-racism advocacy, LGBTQ awareness, teen suicide prevention, and vicarious trauma. Dr. Gottlieb has served as an adjunct professor at the NYU Silver School of Social Work, Smith College for Social Work, and Southern Connecticut State University. She holds a BA from Brown University and earned her MSW and PhD in social work for NYU. And here is Mara to do today's training.
Allie, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes, and I appreciate the nods and the thumbs up. Thank you. Excellent. So I'm just going to take a breath. I don't know how many of you know this, but the local paper, The Patch in Avon, just posted an article about a 17-year-old person being missing and transgender person being missing and expected to have been sex trafficked and kidnapped. And so there's a GoFundMe site, and Allie will be sending the link out to that article. But I just found this out this morning, and my heart was just in my throat in terms of how honored I am to be here today, how necessary this training is, and how grateful I am that you all are here today. So I'm sorry to open with something that is a little bit more, I don't know, foreboding, I guess, but it also, to me, really underscores the need for the training that we're about to do. So as Allie mentioned before, my name is Mara Gottlieb. For a four-letter name, Mara gets butchered in ways I never dreamed possible. So it's Mara like running a marathon, or like marijuana, or whatever helps you remember it. But if you say Dr. Gottlieb, I'm going to think you're talking about my grandfather or something. So you could Dr. Mara, whatever works. A couple of things that I want to just let you know about myself and about this training. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. We'll be talking more about gender pronouns a lot throughout this training, but wanted to start off with that. And I want to be really, really clear about a couple of things. This is not a class. You are not being graded today. I really hope with my whole heart that this is going to be something that is helpful to you, that gives you more knowledge and more confidence, whether you are a caregiver, whether you are working with youth who are in the system, whatever your role is with these populations. I hope that this training feels more like you've been given more tools in your toolbox and kind of more fluidity in terms of being able to talk about people who are part of the LGBTQIA communities. I would absolutely love your participation as much as you feel comfortable participating, but I will never call on you. So in terms of creating a level of safety in the room, I want you to know that you will never be singled out, and however much you choose to participate is entirely up to you. As Allie mentioned, one of the best ways to do this is just through the chat. I will have the chat open while I'm running the training, so I'll be looking at it as much as I can simultaneous to doing the training. And I just really, all of your comments, all of your questions, I really, really welcome it. And it makes the training just so much more interesting and so much better. So the last thing I guess that I'll say about the training itself, as Allie mentioned, we'll have a 10-minute break. We have precious little time. We have from 9 to 12, so a total of 2 hours and 50 minutes together that I think will probably fly. But we'll have a 10-minute break in the middle, but you are grown-ups. And if you need a bio break at a time that is not in the scheduled time to break, please take care of yourself. Hopefully this training feels somewhat like self-care. So please feel free to drink your coffee or tea or milkshake or whatever it is that you have in the morning, and pet your cat or your dog, or have your kid on your lap, or whatever it is that you need if you're at home and if you're at work, however it is that you can take care of yourself. So With that being said, let me just make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what the objectives are for today. I really hope that if I've done my job decently, that you will walk away feeling really, really clear about the differences between gender identity and sexual identity, including developmentally when they come about for us, when we become aware of them, and kind of a little bit, they're actually quite different, but they get lumped into this LGBTQ category, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. So we're going to talk very specifically about how we develop a sense of gender identity, regardless of whether we are cisgender or transgender. We all develop a sense of gender identity. It's just that for some of us, we never really had to think about it very much. So we'll talk more about that and clarify. And then we are going to move into talking about sexual orientation and the differences between sexual orientation and sexual behavior, and then the identity or the label that one might place on oneself as a result of those attractions or those behaviors. And last but not least, my hope is that I will leave you with the ability, because I can't make the desire there, but hopefully with the ability, should you desire to become really competent and informed allies to and advocates for members of the LGBTQIA communities, if you are not that already. I want to recognize and respect that we have 30 people on this call right now. I think that we're supposed to get 60 people on the call, and that I'm guessing that there is a spectrum in terms of how informed people are on this call. I'm hoping there are some caregivers on the call, maybe some foster parents on the call, as well as some practitioners on the call. And there is a spectrum of familiarity and comfort with these topics. And all of you are welcome. And there is no expectation of where you already are on this topic. The one thing I will say, and that's probably like the fourth time I've already said the one thing I will say, so I apologize for that. So like the fourth thing that I will say is that talking about gender and sexual orientation is not an argument about religion. It's not an argument about morality. Whether you find out or not, you all have people in your lives, whether as a professional or personally, who are part of the LGBTQIA communities. It is really just a question of, will they feel enough trust in you and respected enough by you to tell you about their identities and to be their true selves with you. So this is, I hope, an opportunity to really become more of a capable ally to these communities. So Allie just posted something about seeing closed captions and how you can turn them off if it's distracting to you. For some of us, it's easier. I don't know how accurate it is in terms of the in the moment live stuff. So anyway, use it as it feels comfortable to you. So do these objectives, are they consistent with what you'd hoped for? Is there anything that's not on this that you were hoping would be, or do you have any questions? And again, please feel free to use the chat. You can say all set, you can do a thumbs up, but you can also unmute yourselves to let me know if there's anything that seems like it's missing here or anything that's not clear. All right, I'm not seeing anything. People may still be in a sleep state. Oh, good. All right, yay. Thank you for the good. I love it. Okay, cool. So moving forward, there are only two operating assumptions that I come into this training with, and I want to make sure that they make sense to you as well. The first one, and this is at the base of every training that I do, is that each and every one of us is more likely to thrive in this world and in our lives when we feel loved, when we feel valued, and when we feel respected. Can I just throw that out to you all? Do you experience that as well? Is that consistent with how you see the way that you've lived your life, or the way that you run your, that you work with families, or is that consistent with your belief as well? Just, you can type a yes or a no or unmute yourself. Yes. Fantastic. Anyone else seeing lots of yeses? Okay, wow, excellent, excellent. A whole cascade of yeses. Good. So this to me really is at the basis of everything I do. Is if somebody isn't doing harm to somebody else, how do we allow them to be their authentic selves and help them to be all of who they can be? Can we discuss when, if it's ever okay to ask a child how they identify? Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I can't wait to talk about that. So yes, thank you. So excited to be here with you all. It probably shows, I'm sorry, like a 5-year-old kid. But anyway, so that if we can help somebody to feel like they don't have to hide parts of who they are in order to make us comfortable, that there's a better chance that they're going to trust us, that they're going to be open to us, and also that they're going to thrive. So that's, I think, part of the reason why I do this training and why I do the work that I do. And then the second one may be something that you've thought about, and it may not be. This operating assumption, which is just that what is normal for one person may not be normal for somebody else. And whether that's the foods that feel like home to us or that are part of our culture, the way that we worship, the way that we dress, the way that we greet people. We don't have time to go into this more in depth, but when we're talking about sexual identity and we're talking about gender identity, we're talking about different forms of culture. And for each and every one of us, there is some aspect of our culture that we have introduced to other people that may have seemed unfamiliar or different at the time. And just a very, very quick story. My background is Jewish. I'm not religious, but that's ancestrally, that's my family's background. And one of the only things that we ever did growing up religiously was to celebrate Passover. And Passover is this big storytelling meal with all of these different foods that go along with the telling of this story. And I invited a friend home from college to join me for Passover. And she was Catholic and she was Latina. And my mom came out with these plates of what is called gefilte fish. And some of you may be familiar with this, but it is this atrocious, like it is chopped white fish in gelatin. It like basically shakes on the plate. And she looked at this thing with such horror on her face that like, it's amazing she did not run out of the apartment. And it didn't occur to me until that moment that we eat foods that other people are not accustomed to eating and that somebody else might not want to like stick a fork in that and try it. And I would just, ask in terms of having some, openness and flexibility to what we're talking about today, that we all have parts of our identity that somebody else might think is unfamiliar or strange. And as we become more familiar with that culture, those components become less strange. And again, that's an opportunity that we have anytime that we engage with someone from a different culture or attend a training such as this one. So those are my only two assumptions for the training today. And then last but not least, I would just love to offer a couple of community guidelines for the day. By the way, Allie is going to be sending out a PDF of all of these slides after the training. And so you'll have them to use, to share afterwards if you'd like to. It's completely fine. So the first community guideline that I want to be sure that I say, that I kind of re-say, is this is not a class. I am not asking everybody to be on the same page. I am not asking everybody to agree. No one can tell us what to think or how to think or what to believe. The only thing that we can each do, and this is a very, very individual commitment, is to be willing to be open to others, to different ideas or new ideas and information, and just try it on. How does this feel to me? Does this maybe conflicts with what I thought I believed, but maybe there's room for both, or whatever it may be. I am offering you today's training in the spirit of respect, and hopefully it being something that is helpful to you. there may be times when what we talk about gets uncomfortable. And probably if I'm doing my job right, it should get a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. And what I would ask is, as much as possible, if you can stay in the room, if you can try not to multitask. One of the things that helps me when I am on a Zoom call is that I make sure that I put my screen on full screen so that I can't see that other emails are coming in. And I can't be tempted to kind of toggle between other programs. So if that's comfortable for you, that would be great. But again, just paying attention to, wow, like I'm getting uncomfortable, or I'm not sure I agree with this, and there's a part of me that wants to check out. And what do I do with that? How do I respond to that? And the last thing is just, I am hoping I will be taking some risks in terms of disclosing some things about myself. I am hoping that there will be other people in the room who may also feel comfortable taking some risks. And I would just really ask, please, that we respect confidentiality regarding personal information. If you want to share information because you think that somebody might be helped by it, then please just ask permission before you share it. As you know, no one takes a risk if we believe that what we're saying is going to be gossiped about later. And communities can feel very small when people are talking about each other's private stuff. I don't know about you all, but in more my grandparents' generation, I guess, there was sort of an older saying that, don't talk too loud because the walls have ears. Does that sound familiar to anybody? I'm seeing some nods. So walls don't have ears, people have mouths. Let's be really clear about this. And so if information leaves our group, it leaves because one of us shared it. And I would just ask for us to be cautious about that. So with all of those things being said, we're ready to get into the material. Again, unless anybody has any questions for me, or there's anything I've already said that isn't clear, or that you want to ask or say something about. So just want to make sure we're good so far. Again, let me restate for those of you who came in maybe a little bit late, there are no stupid questions. You've got me for 3 hours. There is nothing you will say that will offend me. Unless you're trying to, and then we'll see how that goes. But and I would love for you to participate in the chat or by unmuting yourself as much as you feel comfortable. But that being said, I will never call on you. So it's entirely up to you how much you want to participate. So let's get into some of the facts around the LGBTQ communities. Some of these may be different than what you've thought before, and that's part of the reason why I'm bringing them up. One of the stereotypes, for some reason, about particularly the gay, lesbian, bisexual community, but also I think the trans community, is that it's a very white community. That is just simply not true. 42% of LGBTQ people are people of color. And there is also, as you can imagine, an underreporting bias, because it can be something that people don't want to admit. So the numbers possibly are even higher than that. But, we're looking at a population in the general United States population that is similar to the population of people of color in the general population. 29% of LGBTQ individuals are raising children in the United States. So again, 1/3 of LGBTQ adults are raising children right now. And a lot of the adoption laws have been relaxed or opened up to people from the community either adopting kids, or there are more and more ways that people in same-sex relationships can also have children and raise them. For those of you who did not know this, same-sex marriage became legalized by the state of Connecticut in 2008, which is earlier than about as early as it happened in any state. Connecticut was really, really ahead of the curve with regard to legalizing same-sex marriage. And it wasn't called a domestic partnership or a civil union. It was called marriage from the very beginning. And then same-sex marriage became federally legal in 2015. And we're not going to go into this too much, but if it's something you want to learn more about, there are over 1,000 laws that benefit or pertain to legally married people that same-sex partners were not allowed to benefit from. And that included being able to get on someone's health insurance, being able to get someone's pension if your significant other passed away, but even things as acute, I guess, as your significant other going to the ER because they've been in a car accident or they've had a heart attack, and you not being recognized legally as their family and not being allowed into the ER with them, into the room with them. So once marriage became federally legal, all 1,000 plus of these laws became laws that also protected same-sex people who were in long-term relationships and decided to marry. So that just happened 6 years ago, not very long at all. This is a tough page, and it may be information that you already have, but I wanted to make sure that it was underscored before we got into the training today. I cannot overstate how badly this is a community that needs our support, that needs our compassion, that needs our advocacy. We're going to be talking about some of the connections between some of the risks that I'm reading here and the potential for sex trafficking and other dangers, but up to 40% of homeless youth are in the LGBTQ communities. And some of that is because of running away because of a fear that they will be rejected by their families. Some of that is because they have actually been rejected by their families. Some of them have been threatened with conversion therapy or other forms of trying to change who they are. But this is a population that is tremendously at risk for homelessness. And once someone is homeless, as you know, they are at risk for a whole other host of vulnerabilities. LGBTQ homeless youth are 7.4 times more likely to experience acts of sexual violence than heterosexual homeless youth. So over 7 times more likely than heterosexual youth. They are more than 5 times, or they're 5 times more likely to attempt suicide. So the suicide risk is much greater. We'll be talking more about this too. It's not that there is anything inherently sad or suicide prone about somebody who is part of these communities, but the sense of isolation and potential shame that youth who are part of these communities may feel when they recognize that it's part of who they are can lead to the desire to self-harm or to hurt themselves or to try to kill themselves. In particular, LGBTQ people of color are at greater risk for bullying and other forms of discrimination due to the intersection of race and sexual identity. There can be a double lack of acceptance or double vulnerability there. And this last number is, again, something just for us to kind of be aware of, that at least, because there have been many that were not named, that were not found, that were not reported, but at least 331 transgender people of color were murdered worldwide in 2019, and 30 of them were murdered in the United States. So these are groups that are continuing to be targets of people's fear and violence due to that fear. And so again, the 32 of you who are on this call today represent a group of people who have the potential to really save some lives and be allies to the communities that we're talking about today. One more slide, and then we'll get into some of the kind of more educational stuff. I mentioned to you, some of you came on a little bit later, totally fine, but I'm going to say again that when I got onto my computer this morning, somebody had posted that there's an article in the local newspaper, the online newspaper called The Patch, which I think is in almost every Connecticut community, but this is specifically for the Avon, Connecticut Patch, that there is a transgender individual named Ronan who has been missing since August 30th and who is believed to have been kidnapped and trafficked. And there is a GoFundMe page to hire a private investigator to try to find them. But at this point, they are still missing. So I sent Allie a link to that article to send to all of you, but this is happening right now, like literally right this second, and something for us to just really understand. It could be a whole training in and of itself, really, but if you kind of, you may know more about this even than I do, but if you use your logical brain, traffickers, they prey on individuals who lack strong support networks. There is a sense of, trust me, let me be your family, let me guide you, or who are facing financial strains and who are promised money, who have experienced violence in the past, or who are marginalized by society. And with some LGBTQ homeless youth, all of these. All right, I have a puppy and he's trying to get onto my keyboard. So if anything happens, you'll understand why. But anyway, I am trying to do this training in the midst of an apartment with a lot of things going on. So I apologize if anything unexpected happens. Let's welcome the unexpected. So anyway, this is this is a very, very strong risk for the LGBTQ populations. And just for us to know that without adequate community support or family support, this group is at particular risk for all of these reasons. So just wanted to put that out there. Again, another thing that Allie would be including in the PDF, in the email that she sends to you, is an article that specifically addresses the link between sex trafficking and LGBTQ youth. So there's some more information there if you want to know more about that. So without further ado, we're going to be getting into gender first and talking a little bit about gender. What is it? When do we discover it? And so just to be really clear, when I'm talking about gender, what I mean is you are born at home, you are born in a hospital, you are born in the back of an Oldsmobile station wagon, who knows? But when you are born, somebody looks at you and sees your genitalia and says, it's a boy or it's a girl. And there have been no chromosomal tests done. There's been no hormonal tests done, but this is done generally on the presentation of that infant's genitalia. And so that is how we are assigned a gender at birth. We are told that we are male or female, or our caregivers or parents are told that we are male or female. If we have time, we're going to be talking a little bit about intersex identity, but intersex identity, part of it at least, is if an infant's genitals are not clearly male or female, or there seems to be a combination of both. And so again, that's biological, and there have been different states that have done that have had different laws about whether a doctor has the right to surgically alter that child to try to make them more consistent with one gender or another. Again, we'll talk about that later. But just to be really clear, when we are talking about gender identity, we are talking about the gender that we have been assigned at birth, and how that kind of jibes with how we understand ourselves in terms of gender. Does that make sense to everybody? Seeing some nods? Okay, fantastic. So I am not going to call on anybody, but this wouldn't be a training done by me if I didn't ask you to kind of think about yourself and how you fit into this. And so I want to ask you a couple of questions. And again, you don't have to answer them out loud, but if you're comfortable, I would love it. Can I ask, think for yourself, think back, when did you first become aware that you were a boy or a girl, or for some of us, that you didn't really fit into either camp, but when did you first become aware of this? And I'm going to just open the chat. What are some thoughts? When do you think, and again, this is not about who we're attracted to. This is not about crushes. Someone wrote late elementary school. Great. When do you think you first knew or started to have questions like, I'm a girl and you're a boy, or I'm a boy and mommy's a girl, or whatever it might be? When do you think that started? Maybe at 8, nursery school? Yep. Anyone else? Don't worry about right or wrong answers. And again, what I present may not be consistent with what you understand, and that's totally fine. Clothing, boy versus girl, around 5 when my brother was born, great in comparison to someone else. Elementary school health class, I never thought about it, just followed the norm. I was a girl, never questioned it. Beautiful. That is actually an amazing segue to the next question. And when someone asked me this question, it absolutely blew my doors off because I had never thought about this. And my question is, if you had to explain right now how you know that you are a girl or a boy or a man or a woman or male or female, and you could not refer to any physical characteristics, you could not refer to genitalia, you could not refer to hormones, how would you know for sure that you were male or female? Or again, something non-binary, something in between. How would you know? What would you say? Like, how do you know that you're male or female if you can't use physiological, only from social expectations, societal expectations? Excellent. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Hopefully this is kind of getting, making you think a little bit, for many of us, it's, because as clothing style, great. Some people, gender is a social construct. People will say, because I wanted to be a mother. But I would argue that I know biological men who are the mother and the father to children and who have that mothering instinct. So is there something unique about being a mother to being female? So some people are saying clothes style, gender is a social construct. So we're going to talk about this, but I want to present a couple of ideas to you. As you're going to see interactions with strangers, exactly, based on expectations, stereotypes for male and female, culture, my environment, brilliant. Never cared enough, wanted to exist with what makes me happy. Nice. So for most of us, because we live in a highly gendered world, we become aware of our own gender as early as 2 or 3 years old. And I want to say more about what I mean by that, again, because for those of us who have a gender that is consistent with what we were assigned at birth, we've never maybe thought about it very much. We've never had to think about it very much. There's this great saying that I don't know who discovered water, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a fish. And if I am, we're going to talk about these labels, but if I identify as female and I was assigned female from birth, I've never really had to think about the ways that those kind of connect. Encouraged to bat your eyes, tilt your head, given baby dolls, brilliant. Exactly. Told pretty, asked about boyfriends. If we are born, actually, no matter where we're born, if we're born in a hospital, if we're born in someone's home, we are held and talked to differently based on our genitalia. I mean, literally, or if we're bundled up, then based on the blue hat or the pink hat that gets placed on our head to keep us warm. But boys are carried more like footballs. They are carried around and moved about much more harshly. They are not given as much eye contact as baby girls. They are not cooed at as much. They are not talked to as much. Girls are talked to more softly. They are carried more gently. We are gendered. We are told what our gender is from the moment that we come into this world. And as someone described, and you've heard it, and I don't mean it's not that this is bad, but it's just for us to be aware of that when a girl baby is batting her eyes at particularly at men or at boys, she's flirting. It's automatically turned into something that is heterosexual and that is the accepted role of women. We don't really, sometimes people do, but it's not as often said about boy children. There is an expectation of the kinds of toys that we're going to play with based on our genitalia. I mean, literally. So from a very early age, whether it's being socialized into us or whether it's something that we innately know. I don't know if we know that for sure, but we know from a very early age whether this body is consistent with the way that we understand ourselves to be. And we're going to see a video in just a couple of minutes, but I want to be incredibly clear. A kid who is transgender, a kid who understands that the genitalia of their body's makeup is not consistent with who they know themselves to be, they will understand that sometimes as early as 2 or 3. That's when we understand our gender identity. And to be transgender is to really see what you expect of me and realize that that's not who I am. And again, I don't know if that's something that anybody can relate to on the basis of any other identities that you carry, but this is a different form, I guess. This is sort of more gender expression, but many of us who were girls, we were allowed to be tomboys until we hit puberty. We were allowed to be dirty. We were allowed to wear pants. We were allowed to climb trees. And then all of a sudden, when we started to show more femininity, we were expected to change. And again, I think that those roles are being broadened a little bit. Boys are told from a very early age, don't cry, don't show your emotions. They're threatened with, this isn't masculine when you do this. So we are learning these messages that are different from our authentic selves from a very early age. And the difference with somebody who is genuinely transgender or non-binary is that what they are seeing is that their actual body does not match who they understand themselves to be. And I don't know if that's something that you can imagine just for 1 second, but to be treated as one thing and understand yourself to be something else, the devastation of that and the confusion of that has got to happen for a young person. So with that being said, some of the words that I'm using, I want to be more clear about. Again, when you kind of break down the language, it becomes a lot easier to understand for those of you who might not be familiar with it. To be transgender, the word trans means cross. And so all that transgender really means, it's an umbrella term or an encompassing term for anybody, any of the gender identities, for people who do not identify with the sex that they were or the gender that they were assigned at birth. So if they were assigned male, if they were assigned female, that they do not that they understand their gender to be something that is different from, that crosses from what they were assigned as originally. To be cisgender, cis means with or together. And so to be cisgender simply means people where the gender that one was assigned at birth is consistent with the gender that one understands themselves to be. So that's the cis is with. It is a privilege. There is an ease of walking through the world when the gender that I know myself to be and the gender that I was assigned at birth are consistent with one another. I don't have to think as much about the way that the world sees me versus the way that I understand myself. Does this make sense to folks? And is there anything that anybody wants to add at this point or ask a question about? All right, we're going to see two. Yes, good. I love the feedback as much as possible. It just helps me know that you're here. Really, that I'm not just kind of talking to an empty room, so to speak, an empty virtual room. So thank you. Great. So we're going to see a video that again will hopefully give you some more information and maybe challenge some stereotypes that I think exist around gender. So hopefully you can, I shared sound with you and hopefully you'll be able to hear it okay. If there's any problems, please, you can let me know or you can let Allie know if you're having some technical problems with it. So it pretty much speaks for itself. Take a look.
I'm Jody Patterson. I'm a mom of 5. We live in Brooklyn. We just moved to Bed-Stuy. We're just like a regular family. We are always at a crossroad, like, can we afford tuition? Like, do we eat green food or do we eat like fast food? What's cheaper? So this is Othello. He's my rascal. This is Cassius, my oldest. I like to call him the president. That's Penelope.
And that's the fireman.
That's Penelope, who's 7.
I'm 8.
Penel is my 3rd child, and we assumed girl, like perfectly anatomically perfect girl. Everything looked in order. Really early on, there were signs that Penel was very different. Something was weighing on Penelope really, really heavy. Every time we would try to put clothing on him or dress him or bathe him, there was like an intense reaction to his body from himself. Once Penelope started to speak, it was like, I'm not a baby. It was one of the first like sentences, I'm not baby. And no, it was like no to clothing, no to shoes, no to hair brushing. And so one day I remember pulling Penelope aside and just being like, like what's really wrong, baby? Like, why are you so upset? And Penelope said, well, because everyone thinks I'm a girl. And so I said, oh, baby, it's fine. You can, however you feel on the inside is great. And he said, no, I don't feel like a boy, Mama, I am a boy. And so like that sentence was really hard because I was like ill-equipped. Like, okay, what do I do with that? I don't know how to handle that. I felt like I had kind of maybe dropped the ball in some area. All of my sisters and my mom, raised me to really be proud of being a woman. And my child was like, I don't want to be a woman. Like, I'm not a woman, I don't want to be a woman. I love you, Mama, but I don't want to look like you. I want to look like Dad. So I just felt like, what had I done? Had I forgotten to do something that was really essential to self-pride?
That's my sister. That's me when I was 3 and 2, when I was shy. That's me. That's Cassius. That's Penelope.
A lot of people confuse this conversation that I had with Penelope as being something too advanced for like a 2-year-old to talk about, but identity is something that happens that early. I think when people like say, well, how does Penelope know that he's a boy at age 2? And I would say, well, when did you realize you were a woman? It was like crystal clear what he was saying. I don't want to be you, Mama, I want to be Papa. I want a doctor to make me a peanut. I don't want boobs. I do remember at that moment, in my head, not considering Penelope she anymore. I was really aware that what Penelope was talking about was identity. But in terms of me, why did I let my kid sort of lead in this moment? Because it smacked me in the face. Guys, watch this. Close your eyes. This is gonna be fingers with blood. Shh, don't say it. Fingers with blood.
Oh, you do
Lots of
that.
blood.
It's actual blood for that. Oh, Mom, don't do that. Don't use actual blood. Ketchup.
Fingers with
Nope, not ketchup. I don't like touching stuff. Except
fingers with blood.
chicken.
Like after we just said, okay, yes, you're a boy and it's all good. And like, yes, you can wear really like boy clothing, not like tomboy clothing, but like, just go to the boy section. Like find anything that you want to wear and wear it. He just kind of lit up. Initially, it's like weird. You notice like all the constructs around gender. And in the same way, you become very keen on the way you treat girls and the way you treat boys. I like the fact that the kids sometimes talk about it and debate it or don't see eye to eye. And if Penelope can handle that conversation in our house, then he's ready for handling it in the world. His siblings and his friends protect him. So like, if we're walking into a new situation, a lot of times his best friends will step ahead and be like, okay, so my friend Penelope's coming. He is a boy, he likes to be seen as a boy. You can call him Penel, you can call him Penelope, you can call him Jack, but he's gonna come in and he's a boy. So there's like this kind of like camaraderie that his siblings have with him and his friends have that, they kind of look out for him.
We played challenges in the trio. Brother, it's amazing.
I'm kind of like, like sick in my stomach when I start thinking about puberty. It's like all of the rites of passages of a woman with trans kids, those are the worst things to have. Like a trans boy, he gets his period, sometimes it can be like super depressing. Penel's body is not everything, right? It's a part of him, but it's not the whole story. And so when I think of puberty, when people start to like really focus on how Penelope is looking, it makes me nervous because in our minds, girls look this way and boys look that way. So it's going to be harder for people to understand that Penelope's a boy. There's not a lot of research around things that transgender people do medically to alter their bodies. There's not a ton of research around it. So that makes me nervous. I mean, I don't really like I'm super organic and our food is super clean, and then the idea of like taking hormones and injecting chemicals daily is frightening. And really, Penelope's a boy without changes. He doesn't have to change. He doesn't have to take hormones or puberty blockers or change his body, have surgery. If he chooses to, he might, but he doesn't have to. He's a boy regardless.
That's the Bluosaurus.
We don't know his official name. A lot of the things that I thought I would never be able to handle, you get it together really quickly when it's your kid. I think about the future and I try to think that everything's good, that I live in New York City, that this is 2015, and yeah, I think people's minds are changing. I think the collective understanding is that we are who we are from the inside out, and so that is kind of the direction we're moving in. We're really caring more about individuals than we do about big corporations. I love this. So this makes me feel really kind of optimistic about the future. So 2 lessons that I've learned from my transgender child are, first one, winners or losers that got back up. Like, that's the biggest thing. You just have to keep getting back up. Everyone who's ever succeeded, anyone that's fantastically, amazingly successful, has had like loser moments. The best have gone through the worst. And so we have to keep getting back up. And I think the other one is, accept happiness in any form. Like, who am I to say how happiness looks, or how happiness feels? And it's just, on a simple level, allow for happiness in all forms.
Thank you so much for watching. A couple things that I want to just say, and then I want to take any of your questions or comments or anything that you noticed. One of the things that can happen when a kid comes out to us as transgender, or as gay or lesbian for that matter, is it can evoke a lot of guilt in us. Like, what did I do wrong? Why did this happen? Was I not a strong enough role model of a particular gender or of a particular sexual identity? And as is true with so many parts of a child's development, this has nothing to do with us as caregivers or parents. It is their journey. They come through us, but they are not of us. And it is a major hurdle, I think, for parents and caregivers and practitioners to recognize that this is their identity journey. It's not about something that we modeled or did not model or showed as something that looked positive or negative. And I want to be really clear about something. There is a doctor who on the West Coast who specializes in working with transgender kids. And one of the things that she says is that this is not about the kid who dresses up in the opposite gender's clothing and has fun with it, or the kid who has maybe some more like behaviors that seem more consistent with the opposite gender. This is a kid for whom understanding themselves as the opposite gender is insistent, persistent, and consistent. This is an ongoing belief and understanding for this child, a conviction, if you will, for this child. And again, many of us may have gone through periods in our lives when we weren't thrilled with the gender that we were, where, we wanted to play a sport and people of our gender didn't play that sport, or we wanted to have a hobby that people of our gender weren't supposed to have. But it didn't mean that we wanted to be the opposite gender. For someone for a kid who is truly transgender, and we'll talk more about non-binary or kind of being in the middle of these gender roles, But for somebody who really understands that their body has betrayed them, their body is not consistent. The way the world is seeing them is not how they understand themselves. We have to know that this is a part of their identity that has nothing to do with who we are or how we've raised them or anything that we have said or not said. One more thing that I will just talk about is puberty is a very risky time for kids who identify as transgender. Before we hit puberty, most of our bodies look very similar, and it is hard to tell with clothing on what biological sex somebody is or what gender somebody's been assigned. So we can be more fluid. We can engage in behaviors that are more boy-like or girl-like. It's a lot easier until we hit puberty. And when we hit puberty, and let me just ask you, because I think it's more fun and it's a little bit more interesting, when a boy hits puberty, tell me about the changes that start to happen in his body. You can unmute yourself or you can put them down, but what are some of the changes that begin to happen in the bone structure, in the voice, and yep, the voice deepens. Excellent. What else? Adam's apple, exactly. An Adam's apple grows so that when you see the person's profile, they have it. They get more facial hair. Excellent. Thickening of muscle. Yep, particularly in the arms. In the neck. Yeah, absolutely. Testosterone builds muscle. What else? Jaw looks more chiseled. Exactly. There's more definition to the jaw. This is great. More facial hair. Excellent. More body hair, kind of everywhere, oftentimes, not always, but often. More of a pronounced brow, hairy legs and arms. There we go. So with puberty comes these masculinizing traits. When testosterone starts to, when the hormones start to course through our body at puberty, it physiologically changes us to identify us more with one gender or with one sex or another. And I know I'm using them interchangeably, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but we become more easily identified as male or female. And as you can imagine, to take that back, to kind of roll that back, becomes more and more and more complicated as somebody goes through puberty. So imagine recognizing that one is transgender as someone who was biologically assigned male at birth, and who then has to have their Adam's apple shaved down and has to have all kinds of electrolysis to have facial hair removed. Their brow is more pronounced. It becomes much harder to pass as female after hitting puberty, and it also becomes much more risky to try to pass as female, because it is easier to identify somebody as being transgender if they have not stopped the hormonal process at some point and transitioned to being the gender that they understand themselves to be. And so on the flip side, for women, what changes at puberty? What starts to happen when we hit puberty? Yep, we get breasts. Absolutely. So we're talking about major, full mastectomy. If somebody wants to remove their breasts after that, we get hips. Absolutely. We get a rounder body, more fat, sort of a softer body. Anything else? Interesting. I wonder, I don't know. I think body odors may be different. Men and women certainly both have them, and some people don't have body odor and some people have really strong body odor. But yes, exactly. We get our periods, we get a menstrual cycle. And as the mom here brought up the terror of that. We get hairy even, if we don't start shaving before the hair even starts. It's true. And let me be really clear about this, and kind of for any of you who went through this yourselves and didn't know that this was normal, it is normal. It is part of the normal gender spectrum for women to grow hair on our nipples, for women to grow hair on our chest or on our belly line. So women can also have a fair amount of hair on our bodies, but most of the time, estrogen stops some of those hair patterns in a way that testosterone encourages those hair patterns. So oftentimes we are more likely to have less body hair if we are chromosomally, hormonally female, but not always. But again, thinking about the softening of our jaw, the raising of our voice, that if for many of us who are women, if we look in the mirror, at this point in our lives, it might be really difficult for us to pass as men because our faces and our bodies have been feminized by the hormones that course through our bodies. So one of the options that has become much more available, and you'll have my email at the end of this training if you want to know more about this, but one of the options that has been researched and has become much more available is something called a hormone blocker. And what these doctors work with is they work with kids to identify how close they are to hitting puberty when those hormones begin to course through our bodies. And when they identify that the child is on the brink of puberty, they can insert something in the arm, kind of like Depo-Provera. I don't know if any of you are familiar with some of the birth control that is inserted into the arm, and it's right under the skin. It looks like a little tiny fan, and it just produces hormones in the body, and this produces a blocker that stops the hormones from being produced. It does not change the person's gender in any way. It does not make them sterile. It just holds puberty off until this young person is sure that they're ready to make this life-changing decision for themselves. Am I going to continue along the path that my body started at birth when I was born, or am I going to transition and begin taking hormones that will take me along the path of the opposite gender? So hormone blockers, they don't do anything except stave off puberty for a little while so that the family can make that choice a little bit later in the young person's life. Instead of making it at 11 or 12, the child and their family can make it at 16 or 17 and have that time to really prepare and be sure that this is what that child wants to do. So that's a lot of information, a lot of detail. Again, if you want more, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But are there any questions about this or anything that you want some clarity on that I've covered so far? Do hormone blockers stunt growth? Great question. Great question. They don't stunt it entirely, but most likely, because girls are growing as well during puberty, but they would probably, if somebody who would have naturally had male hormones gets blocked from that, it probably would slow their height growth. It wouldn't stop it, but it might slow it a little bit. And to be really clear, and Kim, thank you for the question. As soon as I take that implant out of me and the hormone blockers are not in my body, my testosterone or my estrogen comes flowing back in again. So any of the height that I might not have gotten during that time, or any of the body hair, or any of those other changes, they begin to happen as soon as I come off that hormone blocker. This Depo-Provera is the shot, and thank you. Okay. No. I was just comparing it. My apologies, Maria. Thank you. I was comparing it to. It's as simple as the contraceptives that go under the skin. So it sounds like a number of you are well educated on those contraceptives. Those contraceptives are just sometimes a safer bet because the individual, it's just a release of hormones, and the person doesn't have to take a pill every day or use other means. So I was just comparing it to that in terms of it being similarly implanted under the skin. It's not a more complicated process than that. I hope that makes sense. You're the best. You all are so great already. Thank you. Other questions? This is excellent. So I'm going to show you one more video. And this just came out, I believe, about a year and a half ago. It came out during the Super Bowl of all times. So not last February, but I think the February before. And it addresses this issue of what happens for us if we do transition and our families are able to help us in that process. So let me go to the next video. Okay. Some of you may have seen this. Take a look.
Growing up, I was always trying to figure out what kind of man I wanted to become, and I'm still trying to figure out what kind of man that I want to become. I always knew I was different. I didn't know that there was a term for the type of person that I was. I went into my transition just wanting to be happy. I'm glad I'm at the point where I'm able to shave. South, south, north, north, east, west, never in a hurry. Right.
One. Now don't be scared. Don't be scared. Shaving is about being confident. Oh, you're doing fine. You are doing fine.
I'm at the point in my manhood where I'm actually happy. It's not just myself transitioning, it's everybody around me transitioning.
So this is the story of a young trans man who it looks like is getting the support of his dad in his first shave once he has been on testosterone, once he has been on hormones. It's everybody around me transitioning. I love that too. I love it. And that notion that we're all getting used to who you are. We love you. We support you. We want you to be who you're meant to be. And we all are trying to get used to what that means. But, I probably watched that 50 times and I still get a lump in my throat when he claps his dad on the cheek and when he can get that support in learning how to shave, which is just for many men, it is a milestone in their lives. So just again, thinking about what's it like to create an environment where somebody gets to be proud of these milestones, where somebody gets to be proud of who they are and feel supported and seen, and that we get the opportunity to do that. Thank you for all of you commenting. Powerful message, very powerful. I believe you can find this on YouTube. So if it's something that you want to show someone you love, someone you're working with, I think that you can find it there. And as you can see, it's a Gillette ad. So one of the biggest questions that tends to trip people up is, so what do I call you? Like what word do I use for someone who is not cisgender, for someone who doesn't identify with the sex that they were born into? And like any other identity that we carry, whether it's, do you prefer Black or do you prefer African American? Do you prefer Jew or Jewish? Do you prefer, whatever it may be? Part of what we're learning is to have the courage to communicate, to just ask, because there are so many new terms and new labels, and depending on the individual and how well they understand themselves, how open, how much of a community they've been able to find for themselves, that person could want anything from, I just want, and I'm just, using the example of that young trans man in the commercial. he passes as male. He might just want to be called a man. Like, just call me male. Just call me he, him, his. Like, I'm taking the hormones and I'm doing all this work so that I can pass as male. Whereas he may also say, no, like I want to use they, them pronouns. I want to be understood as somebody who is kind of in between male and female. We all have our stories, and I do another training for the Connecticut Women's Consortium, who I adore, by the way, and I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier on. It's the best agency in terms of the trainings that they offer and the quality of the trainings and the quality of the people who come to the trainings. But I do a training on cultural humility, and one of the biggest tenets of cultural humility, rather than cultural competence, which, like, I'm not competent in my own cultures, much less anybody else's. Cultural humility is really, how do I let somebody else tell their story for themselves instead of me imposing a story on them? And the same thing is true with these labels. And I just want to bring a couple of them to your attention. So to be non-binary is to really say, I don't want to fit in male or female. These feel too rigid to me. I like the ability to kind of be both or neither. And this is a community that sometimes shortens the name to just being NB. And so if you hear that term, that's what's being referred to. Being gender nonconforming, being agender. A often means not. So I'm sort of outside the gender striations and stereotypes that are there. Gender fluid, to be transgender, to be a trans man or a trans woman. Trans man means somebody, again, who transitioned to being male, and a trans woman is somebody who transitioned to being female or to being a woman. Bigender, I may be somebody who feels that they embody both genders. Gender queer, we're going to be talking about the Q and using the word queer, which for many of us growing up was an insult and has now really been taken on as a term of pride, and kind of, I don't fit into any of your boxes, so don't squish me into them. But we really, what we get to learn is how that person chooses to identify and what feels like the best term for them and for them, their identity. And I want to address a question that somebody asked about, at what age is it appropriate to ask someone? So the appropriateness is not based on age. The appropriateness is really the language that we use. And so there are children's books out there that have non-binary or transgender characters in them that we can have around and read with a kid to just say, have you ever felt like this? Have you ever felt like you were not in the right body? And again, the amazing thing about this is that cisgender kids whose gender is consistent with what they were assigned at birth, they're not even going to wonder why we're asking. And they're going to be like, no, I've always known I was a boy, or no, I'm fine being a girl, whatever it may be. But if we can do this with every child, with every person, we have the ability to just open up a conversation that a kid who is feeling alone about this might not be willing to have. Somebody wrote that I Am Jazz is a great book about this. Yes, Jazz's journey on this is just an incredible, empowering journey of being a transgender woman or a trans woman. And she just, her story is amazing. But more and more people are coming out about having a transgender identity. And as a result of that visibility, we're also seeing more resources that we can use to have conversations about it. One of the things that you may have seen in my page, and it's also on my screen on my little Hollywood square, is that I just tell you what my gender pronouns are so that you know from the beginning how I would like to be addressed. And I want to be really clear about this. They're not my preferred gender pronouns. They are my gender pronouns. The same thing as I don't prefer to be left-handed. I don't prefer to have brown eyes. It's just who I am and what I am. We'll talk more about this at the end of the training, but one of the ways to be an ally is to figure out how to comfortably say, my name's Mara and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And right there, you are inviting people to be open about their identities and about their pronouns. And I want to out myself about something. I taught at the university level for 15 years, and 12 of those years I was at NYU. And being there, even though I grew up in New York City, being at NYU rocked my world. Like, I just had the most incredibly diverse group of students that I could have ever dreamt of or imagined. And probably about 6 years into teaching, I was welcoming everybody, and I was asking them to do kind of an opening activity to introduce themselves. And one of them said, "Can we also say our gender pronouns?" And I was like, oh no, she said, and she identified as she said, "Can we say our PGPs?" And I was like, yeah, sure. I guess. Are they harmful? Like, I don't know what a PGP is. And she enlightened me that it was preferred gender pronouns. And now that's been changed to gender pronouns. But, we went around the room and said, my pronouns are she, her, they, them, he, his. And it was a first for me. And it was a teenager or a young person, I guess she was in her early 20s, who led me. Again, part of what I love about letting people tell their stories is that I'm going to learn something. I'm going to be surprised. I'm going to encounter something that's not part of my norm or not familiar to me. And learning how to incorporate this was a big eye-opener for me. So we'll talk about this more at the end of the training and sort of the how-tos, but it's just something that I want to get your thoughts going on, if they haven't already, is how do you make sure that gender is something that is openly talked about in your workplace, so that people for whom this is an important part of their identity, that they have the space and the ability to talk about this. Any questions about this? Any comments about this? Okay, so this next slide, I hope, is helpful. I really like it, but it can be more confusing to some people and helpful to others. So again, you're going to get this as part of your slide PDF at the end of the training. This is a gender-bred person. And a non-gendered, gender-bred person. And ideally, it's going to serve to clarify the difference between sex, like biological sex, gender expression, and then sexual orientation, which we're going to start to get into after the break. So there are, again, many of us for whom if we are cisgender and heterosexual, we have not had to think about these things unless we have a loved one who is transgender or part of the LGBT community. So if this is new for you, that's fantastic. Then yay, then something new is learned today. But the top one is sex. And you can see that I was going to point at the screen that really doesn't work. You can see that the arrow for sex points down to genitalia. Our biological sex is basically what corresponds with the genitals that our doctor sees or that our parent sees when we are born, and that corresponds with the hormones that eventually start to flow through our body. So we are generally either assigned male or female at birth based on the visual aspect of our genitalia. We don't do a chromosome test. We don't do a hormone test unless the child shows the possibility of being intersex, which is where there seems to be either a smaller penis and a vulva, a larger clitoris with no vulva, the possibility of testes. If somebody seems to have genitals that share qualities of being male and female biologically, then that child would be considered intersex. And then there might be chromosomal tests done to get more information about that child's body. Is it possible that this child will does have a uterus or does not, will be able to conceive or not, will get a period or not, all of these questions that can be answered by some more chromosomal information. But all of this is to say that there is this biological notion of genitalia that is our biological sex. What so the statistic, we will get to this. I believe that the statistic is 1 in 2,000 births, but it will say it in the video that we're going to watch in a little bit. I think it's 1 in 2,000. So to be really clear, so this is where I think that it gets interesting and where there's some stuff that some of us might not have thought about. So biological sex is physical, right? You can see it in the genitalia, and then it's in the hormones and chromosomes. But gender identity is in my brain. It is how I understand myself in regard to my own gender identity. So it may or may not correspond with the physical genitalia that my body contains. And so we've got the sort of the genitalia telling us about sex, but we don't know what our gender identity is until our brain starts to develop a sense of a socialized self. Who am I compared to people around me? Who am I compared to my 2 dads? Who am I compared to my grandmother? Who am I compared to the kindergarten teacher at school? We don't really understand our own gender until we begin to have this socialized identity. And so if that begins to happen in our brain as we grow older, I want to be really clear about something. I don't fully understand how this happens, but I can tell you that there are stories of intersex kids being assigned a certain gender. So, your genitalia has characteristics of both male and female, but it would be easier to make a vagina than to make a penis. So we're going to surgically alter your genitals to make a vagina for you, and we're going to raise you as a girl. This child has had no knowledge that this was done to them. And still, when they become a socialized self, they understand themselves to be male. There is something going on in our brain that tells us, that informs us of our gender identity. It is not a preference. It is not something that we are taught or that is that we are forced into. It is something that we evolve into as we come to know ourselves. So that is our gender identity, and that comes from some neurological process of beginning to understand ourselves as a human being. This is where it can get confusing and where I want you to stop me if it doesn't make sense. Gender expression is how we decide to present our gender to the world. Oh, good. Is there any data on abuse and the impact of sexual identity? We're getting there. I love you. And yes, we're going to talk about that. And hopefully what I explained is going to make a lot of sense to you. So thank you for bringing that up. We're getting to sexual identity after the break. So gender expression is how we choose to present. Like, I can be cisgender, right? I can have been assigned female at birth and I can identify as female, but I can dress like a boy, right? I can wear, and again, this could be a training unto itself, because when we look at gender norms, it's fine for a girl to dress in boyfriend jeans or in sweats or in a button-up shirt. We look cute, but if a boy dresses in a skirt, all of a sudden he is gay or he is flouting gender norms, and people are freaking out about the fact, unless it's a kilt, unless it's culturally accepted. did, but girls are lucky enough to have much more creativity and fluidity in how we are allowed to express being female than boys are. And to just kind of, again, be aware of how that, like, maybe I know that there are, for sure, that there are guys who are totally happy being guys. Like, that's fine. But I wish that I could, wear lace. I wish that I could wear corsets. I wish that I could wear dresses. Like, I just think it's fun to get dressed up, but that doesn't change my sexual identity, and that doesn't change my gender identity. So again, this is a rabbit hole that is so interesting, and that we could go down for a much longer time, but gender expression is different from my gender identity. Can I just see some thumbs up or some nods or something? Is this making sense to folks? Am I explaining it in a way? Oh, good. I'm seeing some thumbs up, some yeses. Okay. Again, there is no stupid question, but if I'm not making sense, I so want you to stop me and ask a question. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of yeses. So where we are going after the break is the difference between our gender identity and gender expression and our sexual identity or our sexual orientation. And so if you take a look, sexual orientation is expressed here in our heart. It could also be, we'll talk more about this, but a little bit in our genitalia, because this is who we are attracted to. This is who, regardless of the gender that I understand myself to be, this is who makes my knees wobble. This is who I am romantically interested in. And again, we'll talk about this much more after the break, but what it's important to separate is the gender that I understand myself to be is separate from the gender that I am attracted to. And one thing doesn't change because of the other. The labels might change, but the actual core identity doesn't change one based on the other. They are two completely separate identities. So let me take a look. Okay, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you one more slide. Again, that may resonate and may not, but I felt like it was important to just sort of get you thinking about these questions. I don't know if any of you have ever actually been misgendered, but in addition to that, have you ever repeatedly been called by the wrong name? And what's it like when somebody kind of insists on seeing you as someone different than who you are? I have a lot of people in my life who also are misgendered by service people, by wait staff in restaurants, by people, at theaters or whatever, wherever somebody is being addressed for the first time. It can be a very, very frustrating thing to constantly feel like people are not seeing us the way that we wish to be seen. So, some of us may know someone, or for ourselves, we may know what it's like to be misgendered. But again, getting clear on our own gender pronouns and being open about them is just one way of this happening less and less. And starting to think, as a result of the work that you do in this training and the changing times, how do you let people know your name and pronouns? How do you make that something that becomes natural to you? What would it be like for you if people refuse to call you by your name? If you have a name that you want to be called, whether it's because it's difficult to pronounce or because it doesn't seem to jibe with who people think you are, how do you think it would feel if people just kept refusing to use the name that you go by, that you understand yourself to be? And just in terms of thinking about empathy and compassion, we don't have to experience something in order to hear someone's experience of it. And, if you are sure about your pronouns and you want people to gender you correctly, just to keep in mind, what does it cost, to just that everyone deserves to be respected this way. Everybody wants to be respected this way. And again, we'll get into this more at the end of the training, but just getting comfortable. Maybe you all can do this in your own workplaces. Hey, hey, how are you? What are your gender pronouns? Hey, my name's Mara and my gender pronouns are she, her, and hers. How do I get more comfortable saying that in a natural way so that it becomes part of the vernacular that we use and anybody can be open about their gender identity and how they're presenting? Because I don't want to go too much into this, but again, my gender expression could look like this: long hair, makeup, whatever it is, but I could use they, them pronouns. And I could really want you to know that I prefer to use non-binary pronouns. They, them can be very confusing to some folks because we're used to using it as a plural to represent more than one person. Right now, we don't have easy language to use for somebody whose gender doesn't fit into male or female or him or hers. There are some words that exist, but they have not yet been adopted into the general public. So they, them has kind of been one of the easier ways to say, I really don't fit within this binary, and I would prefer that you recognize that. So I know that that's language that can take a while to get used to. But again, just like pronouncing somebody's name correctly, it's a sign of respect if somebody's using they, them pronouns to just be able to sorry, I just had a thought, to use them. So we're moving into talking about sexual identity rather than gender identity. I hope I can be as clear about this as I was about gender and that it's going to make sense. Sexual orientation and identity refer not to my own gender, but to the gender that I am attracted to. So who I begin to have sexual feelings for or romantic feelings for. And so we don't really begin to understand what our own sexual orientation is until we have the sexualizing hormones that, with all due respect, I don't mean to make anybody uncomfortable, but that get us horny, basically, that start us having nocturnal emissions if we're guys, that start us being curious about orgasms. Well, that orgasms are just pleasure-based, and that may happen a lot earlier, actually, but that start making us think about having sex with somebody else. So I want to be really, really clear about this and not be pathologizing, but also kind of make sure that you understand how it's different from gender. We understand our gender as early as 2 or 3. We begin to experience sexual desire when puberty starts to hit. So usually somewhere between the ages of 11 and 16. It is usually linked to this. If we have been survivors of sexual abuse, we may not be experiencing sexual desire, but we may have learned that sex has other roles, that sex is a way of connecting with somebody, that sex is a way of having power over somebody, that sex is something that makes somebody pay attention to us. We're going to talk more about that, but that is different from coming to a natural place in our lives where we begin to just feel a sense of attraction toward other people that makes us want to engage in sexual behavior with them. So this is around the same time when testosterone begins to surge in a man's body, or estrogen begins to surge in a woman's body, is also when our sexual organs begin to develop more, is when the testicles begin to descend more, is when the penis grows in size, is when for the woman, and of course we know much less about women's anatomy than we do about men's, because all research has always been done on men, but also because it's an internal organ. I don't want to go too far into this, but again, if I pique your curiosity and you want to know more, the clitoris is not just the little tiny nubbin that is at the, under the hood of the vulva. The clitoris looks like a wishbone from a chicken, basically. It's got 2 flanges or 2 arms that come out from that one little place, and they're underneath the skin. So there's something that that researchers didn't know about for a very, very long time. But that clitoral center has just the same amount of nerve endings as the penis does, and we experience sexual pleasure just as intensely, assuming that the clitoris is involved. So clitoral sensitivity and clitoral growth happen at the same time when we hit puberty. And I want to be really clear about the impact of society here on our sexual orientation. Most of us recognize our attractions around the time. Okay, so we're going to get into great. How much do I believe that social construct affects what we are attracted to versus what we are trained to find attractive? We're going right into that. Thank you. That's what our next activity is going to be all about. So what we're about to start talking about is the fact that most of us do genuinely recognize who we're attracted to when we hit puberty. But there are such heavy expectations in our society to be heterosexual, to be attracted to the opposite sex. It's in most of our religious readings that we grew up with, that we were raised with. It's in most TV shows that we watch. It's in most billboards that we see if we're driving down the highway. It's in most of us were raised by straight people or straight parents. So there is a very, very strong leaning, a visible leaning toward heterosexuality, that for those of us who were attracted to people of the same sex, we may have experienced that and really shoved it underground at first, because what I'm feeling doesn't look like what everybody else is talking about and feeling. And so maybe I don't want to do this or address this until, maybe I'm going to try to kind of hide this from myself or not address this until later on in my life. We're going to talk more about that, but I just want to be really clear. Sexual orientation happens for all of us, regardless of whether we're gay, lesbian, or bisexual. It happens for all of us right around the time when we hit puberty and begin to experience sexual desire. With that being said, I'm going to share a new screen with you. Okay. Does everybody see kind of a large T or a large cross on a blank piece of paper? Is that what's in front of you? Yes. Okay. Excellent. So I'm going to tell you a story, and all that I'm going to ask of you in listening to this story is that you put yourself into it as best you can. And what all that means is that in this story, you are yourself with who you're naturally attracted to and all of that stuff. But in this story, you have a job, which is probably likely already the case. And in this story, you are single, which for some of us is exactly the same as it's always been. And for some of us, this could be interesting for about 5 minutes. So anyway, you wake up in the morning in this story, you wake up and you look out the window, and it is your favorite kind of weather. Whether that means that the sky is cloudless and robin's egg blue, or it means that it's snowing out and you can kind of get cozy, whatever your favorite kind of weather is, that's what you see outside. So the minute you wake up, you're already kind of in a good mood. And the phone rings, and you pick up the phone, and it's your boss. And your boss says, "I am so sorry. I hope I got you before you started to get ready for work. This is probably pre-COVID too, actually. So let's just think about it that way. Or for those of you who are back at work now, it's maybe no different. But your boss says, "I'm so sorry to call you at the last minute. I hope I caught you before you left. The office is insane. It's just insane. And there's too many people here, and we don't have enough cubicles and offices for everybody. So you would be doing me a real favor if you wouldn't mind working from home today. Would you just, as a matter of fact, just take the day off. We have plenty of people in here. Just, you can have the day. It would just be easier if you didn't come in. And, thank you so much. And by the way, I keep meaning to tell you this, but you've been doing this really great job, and there's going to be a little bit more money in your salary every 2 weeks when you get your direct deposit. So I just wanted to let you know that, it's not much, it's what we could do, but congratulations, and, enjoy the day if you can. And we'll see you later." And your boss hangs up. So now it's your favorite weather and you've got the day to yourself to do with, whatever else you want to do with it. And the phone rings again. And it is a really good friend of yours. And they are as excited as they ever get. And they say, all right, I got to tell you something. You know that person that you have been telling me again and again and again that you're really into, that you're really attracted to? Well, I just heard through our kind of friend grapevine that that person is actually really into you as well, and is really open to, going out, starting a relationship, whatever might happen. And what I wanted to let you know is that there's a party happening tonight. I don't know if you were intending to go, but you've got to go because that person's going to be there tonight. And, maybe this is your last first kiss. I don't know, but it seems like this could be the stars aligning, and just, get yourself ready to come to this party tonight. So now you've got the whole day to think about, the party and what you want to wear, and you're feeling good, and it's a really good day, and you can be relaxed, and you're kind of in your most comfortable, self. And the evening comes and it's time to go to the party, and you're feeling really good about yourself, and you get to the party and you open the door to where the party is, and your favorite freaking song is playing on the stereo as you walk in the door. So this is crazy, okay? And you see all of your friends and it's all going really well, and you get yourself something to drink and you're walking around and you're feeling so good. And as you're talking to a couple of friends of yours, you look around the room and you see this person that you have been attracted to all this time. And somehow they look at you in that exact same moment, and the two of you lock eyes with each other. What I want to ask you is, in that moment, when you lock eyes with this person, what is happening in your body? Not up here. What's happening in your body at that moment when you're feeling really good and you lock eyes with this person that you've been attracted to? And just put it in the chat, and I am going to write it down in this quadrant over here. So give me anything, and it can be racing heart. Excellent. Goosebumps. Love it. Okay, so warmth comes over. Warmth. Great. Flush. Mouth opens. I get this sort of stupid look. Tingling. Great. And this doesn't have to be G-rated. You're doing great. But what else? What's going on? What's going on with your stomach? What's going on in your knees? What's going on with sweatiness? Butterflies, weak in the knees. Okay, let me get some of this stuff down. Sweating, butterflies, weak in knees. I don't do well thinking and talking and writing. Energized. You feel some kind of an energetic pull toward that person. Okay, great. Blood flow, nice. That's a very nice way of putting it. I mean, it's possible we could get an erection if we're, in the clitoris or in the penis. There could be, sexual responses to this, kind of dancing on the inside, rapid breathing. Excellent. Good. So here's my question for you. Tingling down below. Yeah, good. Honestly, let's be real about this. Here's my question for you. In that moment, do you have any control over your body responding in these ways, with a racing heart, goosebumps, getting flushed or sweaty, tingling, butterflies? People are writing no. Weak in the knees, energized, blood flow, rapid breathing, right? Are we all on the same page? There's certain things here, thank God I use that extra strength deodorant because my pits are sweating, and that would not be my first, body odor would not be my first choice of things to experience when I am gonna maybe talk to the person I've been attracted to all this time. We do not have control over our body responding in this way. Is everyone Good with that. Okay with that. Oh, what did I just do? Come on back. Okay. So this, what you just described, and only this, is what sexual orientation actually is. Sexual orientation is who makes me feel this tingling, this flushed feeling, weak in the knees, butterflies, like my heart is racing. Who does this for me? For some of us, this happens exclusively with people who are biologically male. And for some of this happens exclusively with people who are biologically female. And for some of us, it's happened with men, with women, with people who are non-binary, with people who are more androgynous, where they're walking that kind of careful balance between male and female. But we have no control over who makes us feel this way. It is just something that we become aware of. The question becomes really, am I going to act on this or not? So let me come back to the, where is it? My original, there we go. Slides. Here's what is so critical to understand about sexual orientation. Sexual orientation, all that it is the gender to which we feel romantically and or sexually attracted, whether or not we ever act on it, whether or not we ever tell them, whether or not we ever admit it to ourselves. It is who makes us feel those feelings. And so it exists on a spectrum, as I mentioned, depending on, who we're attracted to. A lot of people fall into the middle, where once upon a time we may have been attracted to somebody of the same sex or the opposite sex, but we're more often attracted to one or the other. But there's two things about this that I want to be really clear about, and I want to really play to your logical brain. First thing is that, as some of you have experienced in your own lives, if I may be so bold as to say that, there are groups of people in society that the media wants to slander, that the media wants to show in a negative light, so that when bad things happen to that group, we don't feel so involved in it. We don't feel like it's our responsibility to change something, because you know what? It's the way that things are. Many of us are parts of marginalized groups that have been treated poorly by the media, or where stereotypes have been made in order to block our empathy for that group. One of the ways that this has been done with gay and lesbian and bisexual people is to put the stereotype out there that gay, lesbian, and bisexual people are having sex like rabbits, which again, there's no problem with that, but that's how HIV was spread. That's how that bisexual people are people who have to have one of each gender. There's all kinds of, we live in a sex phobic society, right? We live in a society that began with puritanical values where we don't have sex for pleasure, we just have it for procreation. Some of us still belong to cultures and religions that believe that. So to put out there that LGBT people are this like deviant group that cannot be monogamous is another way of taking away our empathy and taking away our ability to relate to these populations. The truth is, the absolute truth is that gay and lesbian and bisexual people are just as likely to be monogamous as heterosexual people, and that there are, as I'm sure you can think to yourself about, I know lots and lots of heterosexual people who are supposedly in monogamous relationships who are having other intimate sexual relationships outside that marriage or that partnership. And I also know a lot of people in same-sex relationships who are completely and utterly devoted to their partner. And again, this is not a commentary. I also really respect that there are people who are not monogamous and who choose to have open relationships. I just want to be really clear that we are being trained to think of LGBT identities in a negative light by conflating it with sexual promiscuity or with all of these kind of value judgments around sex. The second part of what I want to say, and I want to appeal to your logic with this. I am lucky enough not to be a rape survivor, but 1 in 3 women is a rape survivor. And 1 in 6 men is a survivor of rape or sexual assault. So I want to be really clear about those statistics. And nowhere are we hearing some kind of matching statistic that means that 1 in 3 women is a lesbian or 1 in 6 men is gay. If I were a survivor of rape and the rape was at the hands of a man, does it make, and again, I'd love for you to use the chat, does it make logical sense to you that if I survived a rape and the rape was perpetrated by a man, that I might have some anxiety or fear issues around intimacy with other men? Even if I'm heterosexual, does that stand to reason that I'd have, like, even if I'm attracted to men? Yes. Okay. I'm seeing a bunch of yeses, right? It would make sense that after that my trust may have been violated, and then it may take a while for me to get that trust back. Does it seem viable to you that I might have some anger issues toward men, particularly if the rape also included some kind of physical violence, but not even, like, does it make sense that I might, even if I'm heterosexual, that I might experience some sense of anger toward men? Okay. Based on the activity that we just did, where you were talking about the knees trembling and the sweating and everything, could being raped by a man make me feel all of those excited, turned on feelings for other women if I wasn't attracted to women to begin with? What do you think? No, right? Let's just be logical about this. Does it mean that as a heterosexual woman that I might not try or experiment with relationships with women for a little while because maybe I'll feel safer there? Sure, maybe I'll have a same-sex sexual experience because I'm trying to not be with men because of what happened. But being a survivor of rape or sexual abuse cannot change my core sexual orientation. It cannot change who genuinely I'm attracted to. And somebody wrote maybe, and we're gonna talk about this more, but I could engage in sexual behavior with other women, but it's not going to change my true sexual orientation, whatever that sexual orientation might have been. I may need to work through things with a therapist or with a good friend to get that trust back, but it is not going to affect my sexual orientation, the true attraction that I feel. It is what it is. But maybe it will make even more sense if we go to the next part of this story. So going back to the story that I was telling you, where you've just locked eyes with this person that you've felt attracted to for all of this time. So even though your knees are trembling, even though your heart is racing, even though you are sweating out of every possible pore in your body, you somehow get up the courage to approach this person, and they get up the courage to approach you. So, like in slow motion, right? You're walking toward each other at this party. You meet up with each other and you start talking. What I want to know is, between 5 minutes after you start talking and 1 year later, tell me some things that could happen between the two of you. And let me come back to this piece of paper here. What are some things that could happen between the two of you from 5 minutes into this conversation to 1 year later? Anything. Doesn't have to be G-rated. What are things that could happen between the two of you? Yes. Okay. So committed relationship. Jesus, sorry. You would think relationship. Somebody wrote have sex. One night stand. You are not compatible. Stay friends. What else? Now, I will say this with my teenagers when I do this training, and I will say it to you too. There is something you might want to physically engage with that person before you go all the way to sex. Anybody know? Okay, you lose your attraction. Yeah, kiss. Oh my gosh. I am sorry, but if this person is a lousy kisser, they're going to be even worse in bed. So like, let's check out the goods first. Let's make out with them. Let's, go to a couple bases if we're talking about, teenage language. But actually, absolutely, you might lose the attraction. So you could kiss, you can make out. What else? Yeah, really, the moment that they open their mouth, whatever. And, you could be a real teeth person and they open their mouth and it's like, whatever, you see something you didn't notice before, who knows? Discuss sexual preferences. And I want to be really clear. Sexual preference is, do you like rough sex? Do you like vanilla sex? Do you like to be kissed first? Do you like anal sex? Like, we're going to talk more about this, but a sexual preference is, what kind of sex do you like? And yeah, amen. Like, the relationship's going to be off to a great start if you start off discussing sexual preferences. But when we talk about sexual orientation, we'll talk more about that in a second. So here we've got committed relationship, have sex, one night stand. You realize you're not compatible and you stay friends. You kiss, you lose the attraction, you make out, you discuss sexual preferences between you. Here's my question about this list. Do you have a choice, assuming that this is consensual between the two of you, do you have a choice about whether you engage in this list? Whether you experience this list? Yes. Yeah. Everybody pretty much on the same page? Yeah. Seeing a bunch of yeses. Okay. So here's the clarification and the distinction that I think is really, really important to make, which is this list is sexual behavior. These are the behaviors that, assuming it's consensual, that we choose to engage in or not to engage in, whether or not we are attracted to somebody. So I hope that this makes sense. There are times, and this is especially true, I think, for teenagers who have a lot of peer pressure going on for them, but there are times when I can feel so attracted to somebody, so attracted, I feel like my knees are going to fall off. They're wobbling so hard that I'm like nauseous approaching this person. But I choose not to engage in sexual behavior with that person. Can you give me some examples? Where would this happen for any of us? Where, God, I'm attracted to this person. I want them so badly, but I am choosing not to engage in sexual behavior with them. Why would we do that? Why would we make that choice? Just throw some stuff out there. Sure, risks, and that's a great place to start. The risks, they're in a committed relationship, or you are. Being in a committed relationship doesn't stop us from being attracted to other people. But if I'm in a monogamous committed relationship, I'm not going to act on that. It's a friend's partner. I respect their relationship. I may be single, but I respect that it's my friend's partner. It's a work relationship. It's my boss or it's my supervisee. I know I'm attracted, but you know what? Eventually I want to get married and I'm not ready for that. So I'm not going to take that step. I know this person isn't healthy for me. Absolutely. Like, oh, I know this type. Like, I'm always attracted to this type, but I know it's not healthy for me and I'm looking for a healthier relationship. If I hit puberty and I am a girl, I'm cisgendered, I was assigned female at birth and I identify as a girl, and I find myself being just crazy attracted to another girl in my school. I feel all of those things. I feel my heart racing. I'm sweaty. I want to throw up when I see them. Like, I'm energized. I feel a pull toward that person. Tell me why I might choose not to engage in sexual behavior with that person of the same sex. Why would I'd feel it like nobody's business. Why would I choose still not to act on it? I don't want my parents to know. It's frowned upon by the society I live in. I may not know if they're attracted to me. I may be fearful of family or friends' reactions. They might kiss and tell, absolutely, and start rumors. I'm scared of people's reactions. My religion says that it's not okay, or my family's religion says that it's okay. Fear of having a label that's going to ostracize me, fear of rejection by that person or by my friends. You're getting it. You get it. I could feel this. It could be the truest thing that I have ever felt in my life, but I choose not to act on it because there are so many societal pressures telling me that I might not be safe if I do this. And can I just step it up a bit, with guys? I mean, it could be with girls too, but I think more so with guys, there's a possibility of violence. I could be beaten up. I could be bullied. I could be killed if somebody accuses me of being gay, and there is enough homophobia, there's enough fear of that label that people are so afraid that if they're associated with me, that they might too be considered gay. I could wind up dead. I could wind up badly injured. I could wind up homeless. I could wind up being rejected by my family. I could wind up having to lose the community that I so love in my church or synagogue or mosque. I could be struggling, as someone just wrote, with an internal struggle, like I don't see positive representations of gay and lesbian people. How can this be who I am? How can this be something that defines me? So again, in terms of thinking about being an ally, you don't need to be gay or lesbian or bisexual to be an absolutely amazing ally and advocate for the gay, lesbian, and bisexual communities. You just have to have compassion and understanding for the risk and the courage that it takes for somebody to follow who they truly are and who they're truly attracted to in a society that from very early on is likely telling them that this is not okay, that this is something that that makes them different from people around them. So again, this is one of the reasons why somebody might experience a sexual desire for somebody of the same sex and shove it underground until they get older, or they get away from their families, or they become more independent. Thank you for that. And so let me ask you, if I may, the flip question about engaging in sexual behavior. Can you give me examples where the person doesn't feel any of the stuff on the left? They don't feel the tingling. They don't feel the heart racing. They don't feel energized, but still they engage in sexual behavior with somebody. Why would someone do that if they don't have those feelings? What can you think of? Acceptance, exactly, abuse. I'm not attracted to this person, but this is what I've learned from abuse that I've experienced. This is involved with power. These are social norms. I'm struggling with covering my true identity. I'm struggling with peer pressure. How many girls give blowjobs to guys because it's what is expected of them and not because they want some guy's penis in their mouth? We need to be honest about this. There is so much peer pressure and there is so much behavior that goes on that could be so risky for pregnancy, for sexually transmitted infections, for suicide and self-harm because of what it does to my sense of isolation or shame. And I engage in this behavior, and in a way I am abandoning myself. I'm abandoning my true self and what I really want in order to fit in, or in order to cover up who I truly am. So I want to just again really be clear that whether or not we engage in a sexual behavior with someone may or may not have anything to do with our true desire toward them or our true attraction toward them. Before we move on, does that make sense to folks? Good. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm seeing nods. That's just super helpful, and seeing the yeses. So I'm going to come back to our shares. So the next slide talks about sexual behavior. And just to clarify, sorry, I dropped my slides right there. Okay, just to clarify here, and again, so that you have it in writing, sexual behavior is simply the actions that we choose to engage with another person. And we may or may not feel a true attraction to that person. One of the other ways that gay, lesbian, and bisexual people are stigmatized is by calling things gay sex versus regular sex and associating certain behaviors only with certain sexual orientations. And so at the risk of embarrassing anybody on this call, I want you to get this information here. There are 3 kinds of penetrative sex. And I won't even embarrass you by asking you to say what they are. There's oral penetrative sex, there's vaginal penetrative sex, and there is anal penetrative sex. If you have the orifice, if you have the hole on your body, you can have that kind of sex. And again, we live in a puritanical society that often does not want to talk about sex for pleasure or admit that we have sex for pleasure. But the anus has many, many more nerve endings than the vaginal canal does. And so anal sex for people who kind of gradually get used to it, starting with a pinky, starting with something very small, anal sex can be very, very pleasurable in at a different level of intensity than vaginal sex. And so straight people, heterosexual people do engage in anal sex. But again, we don't want to talk about that part of the anatomy. That's where we poop from. Like, I don't want to admit that that's something we do. So we just associate that behavior with male homosexuality. And that's, forgive the pun, but that's crap. And it's really important for us to recognize when we are talking with each other, when we are talking with youth, we've got to be honest and use the right words for this and just find out for their own safety, what kinds of sex do you prefer? What kinds of sex are you engaging in? I wish we only have 40 minutes left, but there are different risks for HIV and other sexually transmitted infections because there are blood vessels that break open more easily in the anus than they do in the vagina. And so if somebody ejaculates into the anus, it gets into the bloodstream a lot more easily than it does through the vaginal canal. It's not about morality. It's just about the biology of what's happening. If what I'm saying, again, if it's something you want to know more about, do not hesitate to email me, but I want to make sure that we have enough time. And maybe there will be time to take questions at the end. So want to be really, really clear about separating out the behaviors that we engage in and why we engage in them from our true sexual orientation, which is something that some of us may not feel like we can act on, which we may never actually tell somebody else. I mean, that would be pretty tragic, but our true sexual orientation doesn't change based on our sexual behavior or based on what has been done to us. So the last category here is where we start to talk about the labels that we assign to ourselves or that we talk about with other people based on the sexual behavior that we engage in or based on our true sexual orientation. So I'm going to give you a for instance. Let's say that I come to you as your client and I am 35 years old. I am female. And you have an intake form where you need to ask me about pregnancy history, about sexual history. And I tell you that I have had 15 partners in my life. Again, I'm 35 years old. I've had 15 sexual partners in my life. You can write it if you want to really be courageous and take the risk, or you can just think to yourself, based on what I've just told you, would you put a label on me? And if so, what would that label be? I've had 1 female partner and 14 male partners. I am a woman. Do you automatically think of a label for me? Oh, did I freeze? Did other people? I froze. Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. Can you? So what I was asking is, if I come to you, I'm your client or I'm your friend, and I tell you that I've had 15 sexual partners in my life. 1 of them was a woman and 14 of them were men. I love everybody who's saying that you wouldn't judge, that you'd want to get more information. That's fantastic. That is the right answer, quite honestly. Like, still ask. How do you identify? Again, you're already there. That's perfect. Many people, though, would say, I would identify you as heterosexual, that maybe this was one experiment that you did, and maybe you did it because a boyfriend wanted to see you have sex with somebody else. You did it when you were drunk, whatever it is. Other people would say, no, 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 you are bisexual if you have had even one engagement. And again, these roles are so much more rigid for guys than they are for girls. If a guy admits to us that they have had a sexual encounter with one man, the alarms go off. Oh my God, you're gay. That's it. That's the label. And again, it could be that they were in an all boys school and everybody was experimenting. It could be that they had a prison term, a long-term prison term, and the only other bodies available were other men. It could be so many situations that do not speak to that gentleman's actual sexual orientation. So the question just becomes, how do we ask? The gender partner switch, yes. So how do we ask questions? And you're already doing it. And again, I want to just give you the possibilities of what we can do. We can just ask that person, do you mind if I ask how you identify? Like, is there a label that you use to define your own sexual orientation? Again, I'm using very specific language. It is not a preference. We do not prefer one gender, but we could be with another. Some of us might. So let me be really clear about that. But for some of us, our sexual orientation is that we are oriented toward one particular gender. So we have to use the term orientation, who we are oriented toward as our attraction, rather than our preference. And so may I ask what your sexual orientation is? And I may just need to know, for the data that I'm collecting, are you currently in a same-sex relationship? And if I use that language, then that person doesn't have to identify as lesbian or gay or bisexual. They don't have to slap a label on themselves. They can just talk about the present day situation that they're in. I've been with men most of my life, but I am presently in a same-sex relationship. So just, all of these labels are viable and they are changing every minute, every day. Some of these I have heard from my students and had never known about them before. A couple of them that I want to just point out to you. So demisexual refers to people who prefer not to or do not desire to have sex until they are romantically attracted to somebody. So just a one-night stand or just engaging for sexual pleasure is not so appealing to people who identify as demisexual. I want to say something about the word straight. I use that term all the time, but it sort of assumes then that people who are lesbian, gay, and bisexual are crooked. And so I don't have a better term for it at this point, but it's just, again, something to keep in mind in terms of the value judgments that go along with some of these labels. To be polyamorous here or to be pansexual can often mean similar things, that somebody is attracted to beings, either mostly human beings in general. They don't have to identify with a particular gender. We have to ask them what that means, and we have to get comfortable talking about this so that we know, do I need to discuss birth control with you? Do I need to discuss certain sexually transmitted infections? Do I need to discuss societal stigma and who you're getting support from? I have to be willing to know what these labels mean to my client or to my loved one so that I can talk about this. I just love heteroflexible. It is what it sounds like. I'm mainly heterosexual, but I'd try things, and trisexual is the same thing. Like, yeah, I'll try. I don't want to put a label on myself. One more thing that I want to say about this list, and I know that it's a lot to take in. I don't hear people say, I went to the heterosexual restaurant and had a meal with my heterosexual friends, and then we went to a heterosexual movie. Like, heterosexual is just not a word that we use. And if people do use it, it sounds very clinical and like we're trying to kind of distance ourselves from the subject. The same thing is true when we use the term homosexual. Homosexual is a really dated term. It's a really clinical term. And if you use it, particularly with youth, what they're going to understand really quickly is that you are not comfortable with this subject. It is really more of a clinical term that suggests our discomfort. So asking about if somebody is in a same-sex relationship, if they've ever been in a same-sex relationship, is the easiest way to use this language. But let me ask you a bigger question. If you need to know if this person is involved with someone, is sexually involved with someone, and how would you ask that without assuming their partner's gender? So, like, how do you ask someone who is apparently a woman to you and not say, do you have a boyfriend or a husband? Or not ask someone who appears to be a man, do you have a girlfriend or a wife? How do you keep those gender words away and still ask about sexual activity? Someone wrote, do you currently, okay, someone wrote significant other. I saw that. Do you currently have a partner? Are you sexually active? Yes, and the word partner also sets off alarm bells for people and can make people defensive. Like, partner, am I in a legal firm? Like, or do you think I'm gay? Like, why are you asking partner? Some people are also savvy to it, but yes, are you sexually active? Are you in a romantic relationship? Are you in a sexual relationship? Do you have a significant other? Are you knocking boots with someone? There are so many ways that we can ask this question really naturally and not ever have to name the gender or assume the gender of this person's sexual partner, and never use the word partner either. Are you in a relationship? Are you sexually involved with someone? The amazing thing that happens when we do this is that if this person is straight or heterosexual, they will not even hear that we use gender neutral language unless they are an advocate or an ally to the LGBT communities. They will just talk. Yeah, oh my God, yes, I'm in a sexual relationship, but he's got really bad breath and I don't like how he kisses and I don't know what to do and whatever. Like, they will just spill. But someone who is in a same-sex relationship will hear you do this, and they will realize that you are okay with them telling you who they are and who they're attracted to. It is this teeny tiny detail about the language that we use that makes a universe of difference for people who are attracted to people of the same sex or who identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. It is relatively easy to do, and it changes everything. So one last slide in this that I made myself, and I'm very, very proud of it. It's really important for us to know that same-sex relationships exist across the animal species. We think this is unique to humans, and it is so not. There are over 450 animal species, from insects to mammals, that regularly engage in same-sex sexual behaviors, whether it's for pleasure or whether it is for, practicing procreation, we don't know, and who raise their young in same-sex pairs. There are a number of them represented here, but if you do some research on this, you will find out so many more. Penguins are another species that are very commonly known to nurture their eggs and take care of their eggs in same-sex pairs. So there is some biological purpose to same-sex relationships that may just not be procreation, but there is a purpose for same-sex relationships, and they have existed since the beginning of time. And again, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. What we want, I think, is to flourish and to have people we love and respect and care about flourish as well. And by respecting what their true sexual orientation is, that is one way of helping them flourish. And I hate to say this, I know that this goes without saying, but again, I have you here and I get to be with you for these 3 precious hours. If we go up to someone in a heterosexual manner, or in a heterosexual dyad, and tell them that we think that they're beautiful or that we think that they're really attractive, it is often, as long as it's not done in kind of a creepy or controlling way, it's often thought of as a compliment. societally, we need to stop being so threatened if somebody approaches us who is of the same sex and says, I think you're beautiful. I think you're really handsome. It's a compliment. And you know what? Thank you. I don't do penises, but I appreciate that you think that I'm attractive. Like, it doesn't have to be a threat to me if I'm lesbian and a man comes up to me and offers me that compliment. So much homophobia, so much of the violence that people are experiencing today is because of the rampant homophobia that exists, the rampant fear that this means something about us. And it doesn't. Homosexuality is not contagious. And even if it were, it is something that is natural to our species and that is at the very core of who some of us are. So I have the privilege of being able to say that as the facilitator today. All right, we're doing perfect for time. So at the beginning, I kept mentioning LGBTQIA, and again, you will have a copy of this slide to refer to, but lesbian is becoming somewhat of a dated word. It also, just because women are not as visible as men in our society, the word lesbian is not as commonly used as the word gay. And there are some women who refer to oneself as a gay woman, but lesbian is used exclusively to refer to women who are attracted to other women. Gay tends to be used for men who are exclusively attracted to other men. The B is bisexual. And again, being bisexual or being attracted to men as well as women does not mean that we are not monogamous. It just means that we can be sexually attracted to people who have penises or vaginas or something in between. Transgender, the frustrating thing about a training like this is the gender that I am really doesn't have very much to do with the gender that I'm attracted to. And so I want to be, your brains are probably fried and singed and exhausted at this point, but I want to just kind of give you a for instance, and hopefully this makes sense, but if not, stop me. If I, Mara, was biologically assigned female at birth, so I'm assigned female at birth, and as I begin to understand my social identity, I realize that I was born into the wrong gendered body and that I understand myself to be male. So I begin a transition. I start taking testosterone before puberty hits. I begin to transition to being male. But as Mara, I have always been attracted to men. That is, like, from the minute that I hit puberty and I start feeling sexual desire, I know that my attractions are to men. If I transition to being male, does my attraction change as well? Does this question make sense? I want to hear people's responses. So if I am transitioning to being male from being biologically female, does my attraction change? Yay, excellent. No, it doesn't. It doesn't change. So now I have to kind of address my identity as a transgender man who's attracted to men. And so I now also need to, if I pass as a man, I need to address what it's like to now, rather than having the privilege of being heterosexual and walking through the world holding my spouse's hand, or my boyfriend's hand, or going to parties with them, or having a picture of them on my shelf in my office, I now have to identify as a gay man and address everything that includes in terms of the kind of stigma and phobias that are out there. So the confusing thing sometimes is how do I make sure that I'm separating the gender that I understand myself to be from the gender that I'm attracted to, and not making assumptions about how those two things do or do not connect. The Q part tends to stand for either questioning. So high schools may have an LGBTQ group where the Q is for questioning or for queer, and it may invite allies in. So people who want to really be supportive of students who are gay and lesbian. The word queer has really experienced kind of a renaissance in our culture. It used to be something that was meant to attack and demean, and similar to other words in other cultures, it is a word that the queer community has taken back to say, you will not hurt me with this word because I'm going to take pride in myself by using it. I'm going to say that this is something that means that I am brave, that I don't fit into the boxes that you want me to fit into. And this is something that I take pride in. So the word queer has come to mean something very resilient and very positive to members of the LGBTQ communities. Intersex is an identity for people who want to openly identify and who have had who were born with a combination of sexual characteristics, so that some characteristics identify them as male and some characteristics identify them as female. And I'm just looking at the time. I think we're going to see a very short video about this because a lot of people have questions about this. So I'll go to that video next. But finally, this was a big learning curve for me. There are people who very strongly identify as asexual, which is, I don't experience sexual desire. And it's not that I'm a survivor of abuse. It's not that I don't have hormones. It's that I am not somebody who experiences sexual desire. I may or may not want a romantic relationship or a long-term partnership with somebody, but I do not experience sexual desire. And so that's where the A fits in. This community often calls themselves ACE as kind of a nickname, but this is, again, a thriving community that has been able to find itself, find other people who belong to it, thanks to social media, thanks to the internet and online communities. So with that being said, any questions about this? Again, some groups are adding the plus. What does the plus stand for? So the plus is basically, we are headed to a place where non-binary needs to be in here. We are headed to a place where gender fluid needs to be in here, where like the plus is, we welcome you if you are in any way not part of the heterosexual cisgendered norm. And we invite you to be here. So the plus is just kind of an attempt to, I think, incorporate the increasing largeness and varying definitions that are used by people who belong to non-heterosexual or non-cisgendered communities. Thank you for asking that question. All right, so quick video, and then we're going to go on to talking about allyship, and we're going to come to the end of the training. So again, it speaks for itself, what it's like to be intersex. I'm going to make sure that the sound is still shared, and here we go.
Raise your hands if you have testes. I'm Pigeon.
I'm Alice.
I'm Emily.
I'm Cypher.
And we are Intersexy.
Intersex describes a person who doesn't fit the typical definition of male or female.
I have XY chromosomes, but typical female genitalia.
I'm a girl who has testes and XY chromosomes.
I identify as a queer, gender non-conforming intersex person.
I identify as a Black intersex man.
Intersex is not new. It's been around since the beginning of human existence. I mean, there's probably even intersex dinosaurs, if you think about it.
Transgender has to deal with your gender identity, whereas intersex has to deal with your biological characteristics.
Often, intersex people get surgeries that they don't want, and transgender people have to fight for surgeries that they do want. They gave my mom the excuse that the internal testes were cancerous, that I would develop cancer.
They didn't even come up with an excuse, basically, in terms of a health-related reason. They instead just said it was about the appearance.
A lot of doctors are very uncomfortable with the idea that I have testes, and they're still trying to get them removed, but I'm perfectly healthy and there's nothing wrong with them.
They did a surgery to remove my testes and told my parents to take me home and just raise me as a girl, and I didn't find out about it myself until I was 12.
There aren't a lot of options, or medical providers don't explore other options. My mom would put me in dresses and she would be like, "Oh, aren't you so cute and you're so pretty?" And I would be like, "No, this is horrible." I was put on hormonal treatment, which consisted of estrogen and progesterone. I just wanted to belong. I wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be different. So even though I knew something felt amiss, I conformed. He was very condescending. He was like, "You intersex activists don't know what you're talking about."
It's difficult for intersex people to find each other because from an early age we're told not to talk about our bodies.
I did feel like I was the only one.
My doctors always told me there was nobody else like me, and so it just perpetuates a vicious cycle of shame and stigma that we can't break out of. I would tell another intersex person that you are worthy, you are lovable.
Your body is beautiful, you're beautiful.
Intersex people don't need to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with them.
I know you feel like you might not be able to get through this. I know you might have really dark thoughts, but I want you to know that meeting other intersex people and finding a community or a support group can be one of the most important aspects in your healing process. And we're out there, we're out here, we're here. And I just hope you can find us.
Again, that video is available through BuzzFeed or available through YouTube if it's something that you want to share with family members or coworkers or clients. And hopefully it made sense and helped, again, to distinguish between somebody being transgender versus being intersex. So thank you for watching. So when I was first asked to do this training, I was told that there might be foster parents in the audience. And I just very quickly, the last time that I did this training for the Connecticut Women's Consortium was in person at their site. And there was a heterosexual African-American middle-aged couple sitting in the very front row. I didn't know that they were a couple. I assumed that they were just office mates. And halfway through the training, they raised their hand and had the courage to say, "We have a foster child, and he is talking to us about the fact that he thinks that he is gay and transgender. And we're here because we want to love him, and we don't know how to be with him, what to say, how to respond." And as you can probably imagine, the rest of this group gathered around this. They were everyone, including myself, was so honored that they wanted to come to this training, that they wanted to learn how to be good to this kid that they were fostering. I was so moved by it. I will never forget it as long as I'm in this business. And so it looks like today there aren't necessarily foster parents. There might be who didn't disclose. But the next couple of slides that talk about being an ally and an advocate, when I made them up, I wrote the language in terms of focusing on the home. So please substitute home for office or wherever it is that you are working with or existing with people who may be part of this community. It'll make more sense in a second. Amy, I'm going to close the poll. I hope that's okay. All right.
Raise your hand if you have tested.
There we go. Okay. So here are some things based on this training, and a couple of people have already been, said thank you to me privately and publicly for the training already. But if this training has been helpful for you and has either kind of stoked the fire of being an ally or sparked it for you, here are some things that you can do to be an advocate and an ally. One of the most important things that we can do is just be aware of our language. there are still so many people who use the word gay to mean stupid. Does this tie make me look gay? Or does this tie look gay? Or that's so gay? Or no homo? All kinds of ways that insults toward the LGBTQ communities are being used as general insults for other, to have other meanings. And one of the first things that we can do is just to say, listen, I don't mean to govern what you're saying, but I'm not comfortable with that language. Like, if we're in this group together, I would rather that you didn't use that language. As a white European ally and anti-racist ally and advocate, using the N-word is something that I will not allow people who are not African-American or Black to use in my presence. It's not our word. It's not part of my community. And so I speak up when it's something that I hear. And it's just a similar thing. If it doesn't identify you, I just would ask you to ask them not to say it's not your word. Come up with another one. Come up with stupid, use asinine, whatever it may be, but please don't use a word that actually identifies a population that may be represented in the space where we are. Have books around that include characters that are in same-sex relationships or who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. There are so many of them now. I'm going to be giving you a page of resources that can guide you to some of those books, but particularly if you are in an environment where there are educational resources around, make sure that you have pictures of people in same-sex relationships, that you show movies that involve people in same-sex relationships, and not just the ones where they die at the end or they end up being the criminal, or like all of the negative crap that we used to see around this population to further pathologize this population. Find the stories that are the good stories, that have the happy endings, that have a representation of couples in same-sex relationships as well as in opposite-sex relationships. And when you are talking, if you are a caregiver or you're working with a young person, as much as possible, use that gender-neutral language until they tell you the gender of the person that they are involved with, because they will, especially if you start off with gender-neutral language. They will open up to you and entrust you with that information. So again, are you in a sexual relationship? Are you in a romantic relationship? Is there anyone you're attracted to? Is there anyone you're having sex with? Be open about it without using gender, and that person will come forth to you about the gender. You just have to listen for it. Second page of this. Okay, so we were just talking about this. You can ask if they're dating anyone. You can ask if they're in a relationship, if they're attracted to anyone. And those questions don't have a gender attached to them, so that person can tell you their story instead of us assuming it for them. This next bullet point is really massive. And so I cannot overstate this next bullet point. Somebody coming out to us is a massive, massive leap in their trust of us. They are risking so much. They are risking our making fun of them. They're risking our trying to pray away the gay. They are risking our trying to put them in conversion therapy. They are risking being ostracized. They are risking being made fun of or being bullied. So please, please remember what a big deal it is for someone to entrust us with this information, regardless of whether they are a coworker or they are a client or they are a family member. It is an honor if somebody shares this information with us, and we need to treat it like the precious thing that it is. But also we need to not pressure someone to tell us this information if they're not ready. It could be too vulnerable. It could be too scary, and the trust hasn't been there yet. The same as them telling us about any other identity that is invisible to us until they tell us about it, that is a marginalized identity. So be patient, don't rush the process, but also recognize what an honor it is when somebody tells you. And please, please, once someone has told you, do not share that information without that person's permission. That is an absolute betrayal of trust, and could stop the person from being willing to open up to you, to being willing to be honest with you. The last thing that I'm going to say before I show you the final slides is, if you have attended this training today, and even though you've been here, you know in your heart that somebody being lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, or transgendered is something that you cannot seem to get your head around, that it is something that you cannot seem to find respect and empathy for in your heart. I'm going to ask you as much as possible, please don't work with gay and lesbian individuals. Please refer them to somebody else. And, we're not really allowed to say this about any other population. I'm not allowed to say, you're Jewish, and so I don't feel comfortable working with you, or you're Japanese, and because of World War II, I have too many stereotypes about Japanese people. I'm not legally allowed to do that as a practitioner. But I am saying to you privately, person to person right now, if you know that there's a chance that you're going to try to shame this person out of their identity, to convince them that they're not really this identity, to use other means, please, please, please refer them to somebody else, because that person is at risk of suicide at your hands. And I just cannot say this strongly enough. We need to be emphatic and informed allies to this community so that we don't see the statistics rise that I showed you at the very beginning. With that said, one of the many ways that you can be an ally is simply to have one of these flags or labels up in your office or in your signature. When I was working in a university setting, I would have the safe zone. I would say my office is a safe zone with those rainbow letters for people of all races, religions, body sizes, sexual identities, gender identities, etc., so that people knew that this was something that I was aware of and teachable on and willing to talk about. Having a rainbow flag does not mean that you are gay. It does not mean that you're identifying with these communities. It means that you are letting people know that when they come to your space, whether they walk into your house or they walk into your office, that is a safe space for them or for themselves, or if they have loved ones who are part of these communities. A lot of these you can get for free from a number of the resources that I'm going to show you on the next slide. So you don't have to pay for it yourself, but just having something like this up will signal to people who are part of the LGBTQIA+ communities that you are an ally and an advocate. And so the last slide, again, if you want information or when you want more information, these are some of the best resources. The Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, which is called GLSEN for short, they will send you free stickers. They will send you free pamphlets. The Trevor Project has done an incredible amount of work in terms of advocacy around these identities. Genderspectrum.org. The Trans Lifeline is a suicide and self-harm lifeline, particularly for members of the trans community. And then the Triangle Community Center is, particularly since True Colors has disbanded, the Triangle Community Center is one of the only gay and lesbian centers that is in Connecticut, where you can refer people to 12-step support groups that are gay, lesbian friendly, where you can get other kinds of resources. And with that said, that brings us to the end of the training. We have 3 minutes left. Is there anything that is a burning question that you might have, or a comment that you want to make that you'd like to ask or say before we end? I'm getting in a lot of thank yous. Thank you. I know that I did a whole lot more talking than you did here, but you were wonderful and involved, and thank you for being willing to be here. I'll stay on for a little while if people want to privately chat with me, but if you never saw me again and you had a question that you wanted to ask, I would love for you to ask it. Are there any resources specific to agender, gender fluid, and non-binary individuals? Yes, more and more. And I would say contact any of these places to get some of those posters and pamphlets and more information. It's a great question. It is kind of the newest wave of this movement, I think, for people to be more open about identifying as agender or gender fluid, and something that we definitely need to know more about. Oh, people are just saying they feel more informed as a result of this. Thank you. That was my intention. I'm really glad. I hope hopefully you also got continuing education credits for this. Again, I want to thank the Connecticut Women's Consortium and DCF for holding this training, for being willing to hold this training. My company is called Talking Changes. You can email me at mara@talkingchanges. I'm realizing I didn't put a last slide down with it. Bye, everyone. Thank you.